lot of people seem to be confused about data centers, or other people don't seem to really care too much about it. They just want to collect a check. I recently made a video talking about how I'm not going to be participating in building infrastructure for these companies that colluded with the American government to censor Americans. This video has since gone relatively viral, and there seems to be some people that are being combatant in the comment section. Some of the tradesmen are talking like how they just want to get their money and get paid and retire. Other people are like, yeah, that we should stand up against this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break down right now exactly the trajectory that we're on and their alternate routes that we can actually go down. So let's start with the one that we're actually on right now. What's happening is we're having an absolute explosion of data centers, and there are people around all over the United States that are petitioning their local governments saying that they do not want to have these data centers in their vicinity. And wouldn't you know it, the corruption is all the way down to these local centers, and they're just building it anyway. And the thing is, like, these data centers are going to be taking energy, they're going to be taking water and all this stuff, right? And there's a lot of these data centers that colluded with the American government. And what they did was they used their technological advancements, their social media platforms and such, to censor Americans, to actually help rig an election, if you will. And then now we have these Americans, many of these Americans are tradesmen, or union tradesmen at that. And what they're doing is saying, you know what, that doesn't really matter to me. I'm going to build these data centers anyway, because you know what, as long as I'm paid. And that mentality right there is how America can fall. This whole, oh, it's all about me mentality, and nobody wants to actually unite and do something about the greater good of our country. Like, that's not what our forefathers did. When you talk about the military forefathers, our forefathers that created this country, or the forefathers in the Union that fought for our rights to actually have the 40-hour work week and overtime and holiday pay, and to fight for actually having jobs that we can get paid for to a reasonable living wage. But now we're building these data centers which will inevitably run AI, and it's going to be running people out of jobs. But yet nobody really seems to care about that. So as long as you have your check, then you're all set. You guys don't seem to mind too much about absolutely selling your country out and selling out your children down the line, that they're going to have to deal with this new world that we're going into. But you know what? As long as daddy got a check, I guess everything's okay, right? Absolutely brainwashed. We have to be better than that. All right, so let's talk about the next option. The next option is all of these tradesmen, all the workers, all the Americans say, no, I'm not building any of this. It is absolutely wrong. I want nothing to do with it. And not only do they not build it, they pick it and they stand up against all the infrastructure with data centers across the board. Well, what will happen with that context is the fact that other countries, like say China, for instance, they're going to be building these data centers. And let's say that they are successful with these data centers. They have all the energy for it, et cetera, right? Because their people aren't going to stand up to anything. Well, what's going to happen is the velocity of their economy is going to be substantially faster than us over here in America. And what that means is, like, the way information and the way payments are traveling is going to be significantly faster than over here in the Western Hemisphere. And so our economy is not going to be able to keep up, which would make it to where America is no longer that first world country that we all know and love, right? So what can we do about it? Everybody wants to stand up and say no. Well, then if we're going to compete, then that means that you're going to have to go to war. And this is going to spill into World War III, because you can't have another country depicting this stuff and leading their hemisphere, if you will, down this path of satanicism, if you will, this path of culling mankind and accumulating their data, which, by the way, that's what this is. Your most valuable thing in the world is your time. And what data is, the accumulation of your time. So right now I'm speaking into this video, and this video is being collected and harvested, the data, my voice, my image, all this stuff. It's all data accumulation, right? And what they're going to be able to do is they're going to be able to harvest this and then be able to use these algorithms, if you will, to depict, say, advertisements and things like that, right? So if Americans truly stand up to this and say, no, we're not going to do this, this is not how it's going to go, well, then there has to be military operations to follow it, because the rest of the world cannot follow this suit either. And there was once a time where the American people led this front. But a few years ago, a lot of people seem to get complacent and just let things happen and just, let's let bygones be bygones. And now we're headed down this trajectory that nobody really wants. And this leads me to which, by the way, if that were to happen, that World War III, we would be back in the Stone Age. Everything would be analog, all that good stuff, right? So maybe that's what you want, but there's going to be a lot less life at the end of this thing. And the world's not going to be anything like we thought it was. But this takes me to my next point, which I believe this is the trajectory that we should probably go on. I think this is the best for everybody involved, the entire world, and the light of consciousness is super important here. And so this is the hybrid version, if you will. That video that I showed you earlier in this clip, it's if you read the captions in there, it says, I'm not going to build infrastructure for companies that colluded with the American government to censor American. That does not mean, or Americans rather, that does not mean that it's all data centers. What that means is these corporations that actively censored Americans to make it to where they couldn't get the correct data points to make good, conscious decisions for themselves and their families when there was this whole pandemic going on. These people that couldn't make good, conscious decisions for themselves and their families when it came to who to vote for, and how they colluded with these mainstream media organizations to make it to where they just propagandize absolutely everything. I cannot, as a man, as an American man, sell my morals and my dignity to build the infrastructure for these entities that tried to destroy America in the first place. Where is your line? Where do you say, no, my morals cannot be bought because I'm not seeing it? And you know what? I'm not trying to call people out. What I'm really trying to do here is trying to coast you in the direction that there are options here, and you don't have to sell your soul here. So now let's take a look, right? Say we don't build the infrastructure for these entities that tried to destroy America, right? Well, there's other AI platforms or data center platforms, if you will. The ones that didn't try to do this stuff. Ones that actually can be pushed around to where we can actually start owning our own data. Which, by the way, not a single union representative have I seen is pushing for the fact that the American people should own our data. Data is the most valuable commodity in the history of mankind. And yet nobody's pushing for it. I don't see many representatives pushing for it in Congress. So at what point do those American workers say, no, I'm in charge of this country and I don't want to build this infrastructure unless I own my own data? We're selling out for a paycheck. A paycheck that you're going to be putting towards taxes and bills, barely getting the retirement that you want, getting 3.5% raises year after year? They printed over half of the money ever printed in the last, 7 years? And we're making pennies on the dollar while building an infrastructure that nobody wants? What are we doing here? We need to get what's ours. And what's ours is our data. We should be able to own it. So now let me get back on track here, okay? We don't build the infrastructure for these organizations that try to collude and ruin America, right? And then what we do is we do build infrastructure for these ones that didn't do that. But it's not without organizing and saying we need to own our own data, all right? So we need to be able to step back and say, what are we doing here? Are we doing the right thing for ourselves and our children in the future? And what sacrifices am I willing to make to get that done? Because I'll tell you what I'm willing to make. I'm willing to hang my tool belt up and not build this infrastructure that's it is absolutely going to enslave my children, your children, our children. I don't want that. I want to be able to look at my kids one day and they look up to me and they say, Dad, during this revolution where the government turned tyrannical, when these tech mongers turned against the American people, what did you do? And I don't want to look at them and tell them I built infrastructure for those very companies that sought to destroy you. I'm not doing that. I'm an American. I'm an American man. And there are people before me that sacrificed way more than just a paycheck for me to be sitting here and just going to work and saying, well, at least I got mine. If that's your mentality, shame on you. There's plenty of other work out there that you can do, and you know it as well as I do. I'm a tradesman too. act like that there wasn't any work before these data centers. Now look, you have a responsibility as an American. You have a responsibility as a tradesman to look into what you're building and seeing, am I truly getting mine? We're building infrastructure that is going to erase people's jobs. If I'm not mistaken, unions used to stand for the fact that we would get paid a decent wage, and it would bat heads if people try to take our jobs and to do it for pennies on the dollar. But now we're building infrastructure so it can take millions of Americans' jobs. Where is our mortality or morality? Where is our dignity here? We could do better. And right now I'm starting that conversation. When is enough going to be enough? When are you willing to sacrifice? Because I haven't seen it. We're building all this bullshit and no one's willing to sacrifice anything. Well, it's time the tides are turning. And I think that time is right now. See you in the next one.
Your AR-14s.
Okay, this is not okay.